Meanwhile, somewhere in the Triverse on the other side of the portal, the Mirrorverse, we delve into Part 3 of the Commander Atlas Vale saga. Quick reminder, you don't need to have seen the first 2 parts of this mini-series to jump in here. Here's a brief recap. Commander Atlas Vale woke from a coma on his ship, the Requiem, to find it overrun by a virus that had turned his crew into monsters. After a harrowing escape from this nightmare, he has begun docking procedures at a space station, but something doesn't seem right. As Vale's shuttle docked and the bay doors creaked open with a slow, reluctant shudder, almost as if the station itself was reluctant to let anyone else enter its eerie, ghost-like halls. Commander Atlas Vale, alone on the approaching shuttle, shivered, a feeling not caused by the icy emptiness of space. To anyone else, the station might have looked like a sanctuary, silhouetted against the starry galaxy. But Vale knew the truth. In the boundless stretches of space, salvation was a rare luxury, particularly in places haunted by tragedy. The lack of the usual welcoming team of medics and security guards was the first clear sign that things were not right. Vale had braced himself for this, but the oppressive silence that greeted him as he stepped out was deeply unsettling. It was a thick, telling silence, laden with the echoes of things left unsaid and cries that had never been voiced. The docking area looked like a scene of chaos, possibly from a rushed evacuation, or maybe even a struggle. Personal items were strewn among high-tech gear, with a child's toy lying sadly next to a datapad that flashed with unread messages. As Vale walked, his footsteps echoed ominously, heightening his alertness. The emergency lighting of the station cast elongated shadows, occasionally tricking him into seeing movements from the corners of his eyes. He spun around more than once, only to be greeted by the mocking stillness. "Welcome to the party," Vale muttered under his breath. The station's systems were running, but wouldn't respond to his attempts to access logs or communications. It felt as if the station itself had been muted, a silent witness to whatever horrors it had seen. Vale's journey brought him to the command center, the nerve center of the station. As the doors hissed open, he was met with a scene that looked like a moment frozen in chaos. Monitors flickered with static. Others still showed the final, desperate messages that had been sent out. A card game lay abandoned on a table, as if the players had been suddenly pulled away. In this place, where everyday life had been so abruptly cut off, Vale found the station's log. The entries started off mundane enough, detailing arrivals, departures, supply counts, and routine maintenance. But as he read on, the entries grew more ominous. There were reports of a quarantine breach, a containment failure, and then panicked notes about an unidentified pathogen. The final entry was a chilling warning. "Do not come for us. It's too late." As Vale digested the chilling warning in the log, a faint sound broke the heavy silence. A soft, almost unnoticeable whimper. Instinctively, his hand reached for the Entech blaster at his side as he turned toward the noise. In the dim shadows of the command center, he could just make out a figure huddled on the ground. It was a person, or at least it used to be. Even from a distance, the unnatural bend of its limbs and the erratic, twitching movements were unmistakably wrong. "Damn it," Vale whispered, a wave of realization washing over him. The virus had reached the station before him, its grotesque effects manifesting in the distorted figure before him. This place was no sanctuary. It was just another grave, much like the Forsaken Requiem had been. Vale steeled himself as he moved closer, his blaster trained on the figure. His instincts, sharpened by years of commanding space missions, were in full effect, yet the remnants of his humanity also stirred within him. "I'm sorry," he whispered softly once more, still unsure whether the apology was meant for the creature or himself. Suddenly, the figure lunged with a startling quickness that contradicted its prior immobility, its movements a grotesque mimicry of a human's. Vale reacted instantly. The blaster fired, the flash briefly illuminating the dim space, the sound echoing loudly in the confined area. As the figure fell, the oppressive silence enveloped Vale once more. He stood alone, a solitary figure amidst the echoes of his actions, engulfed by the enveloping darkness. Vale continued deeper into the station, with his blaster as his unwavering companion, the silence broken only by the occasional crackle of static from the communication panels. The logs had offered him a trail of clues, a narrative of disaster that echoed the tragic events he had witnessed on the Requiem. His footsteps reverberated through the empty hallways, a constant reminder of his isolation. His next destination was the research labs, a place where answers might be hidden amidst layers of terror. The door to the labs opened with a mournful creak, revealing a scene that resembled a chamber of nightmares. Tables were cluttered with scattered papers and vials of mysterious substances. Most disturbingly, the containment units lay in ruins, their shattered glass stained with a dark, viscous substance. Vale's attention was drawn to a series of journals scattered haphazardly across a workstation. The entries began with precise scientific handwriting that gradually deteriorated into frantic, illegible scribbles, a descent into madness. Flipping through the pages, Vale pieced together the story of how the virus had first infiltrated the station. A survivor from the Requiem, seemingly uninfected, had been brought in for treatment, but had unknowingly been a carrier of the virus, a Trojan horse biding its time. To Vale, this reminded him how centuries prior the mechanoids, a race of interstellar machines who were bonded with flesh, tried to take over the galaxy. Perhaps they are back. As he read, Vale let out a scornful laugh. Should have known better, he muttered to himself, the irony of the situation not lost on him. Like their counterparts on the Requiem, the station's scientists had been driven by a curiosity to study the unknown, a pursuit that had led to disastrous consequences. The eerie sound of scraping against the floor yanked Vale back to the present. He was not alone. From the shadows between the shattered containment units, a figure staggered forward, its appearance distorted into something grotesque by the virus's horrific effects on the human form. The face was almost unrecognizable, its features twisted unnaturally, with one eye grotesquely enlarged and bulging from its socket. Vale raised his blaster, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon. It offered both reassurance and a reminder of his grim reality. "Guess we're doing this dance again," he said, his voice tinged with grim acceptance. The infected charged at him, moving with surprising speed despite its deformed body. Vale's response was swift. His blaster roared in the confined space. The creature stumbled from the impact but didn't fall, showcasing a terrifying resilience. With a grunt, Vale dodged to the side, narrowly escaping a swipe from the creature's elongated claw-like fingers. He fired again, and this time the creature collapsed, becoming a heap of twisted limbs and oozing dark fluid. Gasping for breath, Vale took a moment to survey the room. The aftermath of the encounter was a grim reminder of the ever-present danger lurking within the station. The virus was here, its destructive presence a haunting echo of past horrors, a shadow that seemed to follow him even as he tried to escape it. He quickly gathered the scattered journals, stuffing them into his bag. They were crucial evidence of the station's grim fate and might hold clues to the virus's weaknesses. With one last look around the lab, a place now laid bare by violence and tragedy, Vale turned and walked away, feeling the weight of his mission pressing down on him with each step. The station's corridors stretched out endlessly before him, forming a labyrinth of darkness and silence. Yet, Vale was no longer intent on escaping. Now, he was the hunter, driven by a desperate need to confront the nightmare that had taken everything from him. He was determined not to rest until he had exacted his revenge, until the enveloping silence was shattered forever. Vale navigated the engineering deck, a complex maze of corridors and bulkheads, with each turn bringing him closer to his goal, the very heart of the station. Here, he hoped to find what he needed to put his desperate plan into action. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a constant, tangible reminder of the virus's pervasive and deadly reach. His footsteps were barely audible, the soft sounds absorbed by the oppressive, heavy atmosphere that enveloped him. In the engineering control room, the dim glow from monitors cast a pale light, revealing the chaos that had engulfed the space. Consoles hummed with activity, their screens alight with warnings of critical errors and system failures, a digital tumult that had gone unchecked. Vale approached the main console, his fingers swiftly navigating the keyboard as he pulled up the schematic of the station's energy core. His plan hinged on understanding the complexities of the system he intended to manipulate. As Vale absorbed the diagrams, the silence was suddenly shattered by a static-laden crackle over the station's intercom. He tensed, half expecting to hear the voice of another survivor. Instead, a guttural, inhuman noise filled the air, a sound that seemed to scrape against reality itself. The virus had not only taken over bodies, but now, it appeared, the station's communication systems too, manifesting in a way eerily similar to the horrors he had encountered on his own ship. Shaking off the unease, Vale refocused on his critical task. The energy core, the pulsating heart of the station, powered every system and lit every corridor. To reach it, he would need to traverse sections now likely swarming with the infected, making it a perilous trek through the station's innards. Preparation was essential. Vale scoured the engineering deck, collecting any tools and supplies that could be useful. He found welding torches, power cells, and even a rudimentary plasma cutter, items that could serve as weapons or tools in a pinch. With his makeshift arsenal ready, he embarked on his mission, the weight of his equipment serving as a constant reminder of the mission's seriousness. The journey was fraught with danger at every turn. Infected creatures, twisted parodies of their former selves, lurked in the shadows, emerging to confront him. Each encounter was a desperate fight for survival, with Vale relying mostly on his blaster and improvised weapons to fend off the relentless onslaught of mutated foes. During a particularly harrowing encounter, Vale was ambushed by a group of infected, their bodies grotesquely distorted. Vale fought back with a fierce determination, his blaster slicing through the air, each shot a stark act of defiance. He wielded the plasma cutter with a grim resolve, using it to sever limbs and slice through the mutated flesh, transforming a tool meant for repair into an instrument of survival. As the last of the attackers fell, Vale took a moment to catch his breath, the acrid scent of burnt flesh and ozone heavy in his nostrils. He surveyed the corridor, now in ruins, the devastation around him a reminder of his own will to survive. But there was no time for Vale to rest. The core awaited him, promising a chance to finally end the nightmare. With a resolute push, he continued forward, each step taking him deeper into the heart of darkness. The station seemed to pulse around him, a maze of metal and shadow, its secrets exposed by the insidious touch of the virus. Leaving the engineering deck behind, Vale descended into the lower levels of the station. The humming presence of the core called to him like a siren, urging him onward. The gathering storm was all around him, but he remained undeterred, the eye of the tempest, calm and resolute amidst the swirling chaos. Vale's descent felt like a descent into the very bowels of hell. Each level he moved down brought him closer to the energy core, the vital heart of the station and the centerpiece of his desperate plan. The corridors here were darker, the emergency lighting sparse and flickering, creating long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes, heightening the sense of peril. Here the presence of the virus was suffocating. The walls themselves seemed to pulsate with a sinister life, covered in organic growths that throbbed in unison with some unseen heartbeat. Despite the overwhelming horror that surrounded him, Vale pressed on, his resolve steeling him against the dread. He veered off his intended path to explore the research annex, driven by a sliver of hope that he might find something, anything, that could offer him an advantage. The annex was like a graveyard of scientific dreams, with projects left abandoned mid-operation and notes and data pads scattered about in the chaos of the outbreak. Vale sifted through the remnants, his efforts eventually rewarded with an audio log from one of the scientists. The log provided a chilling narrative of the initial infection and the subsequent rapid spiral into madness. The scientist's voice, initially calm, gradually broke into hysteria as it detailed the horrific mutations and the grotesque physical transformations caused by the virus's insidious invasion. "We should never have tried to play gods," the voice on the audio log crackled, a sob catching in her throat. The log ended abruptly in a cacophony of screams, gunfire, and then static, echoing the grim fate that had befallen the station's inhabitants. Vale pocketed the device. Pushing deeper into the annex, Vale stumbled upon a lab that appeared almost untouched by the chaos that had engulfed the rest of the station. Inside, vials of luminescent liquid were neatly arranged, evidence of ongoing research into the virus. Notes hastily scribbled in the margins of journals hinted at a potential breakthrough, a susceptibility of the virus to extreme temperatures. This information, though preliminary, sparked a glimmer of hope and provided a possible avenue to exploit in his desperate quest to end the nightmare. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Vale set to work, improvising a device that could exploit the virus's vulnerability. He scavenged the station's maintenance supplies for the necessary components, a high-capacity coolant tank, tubing, and a regulator from a damaged environmental suit. The assembly was makeshift and unrefined, but it was functional, a crude weapon that might just turn the tide if the notes were correct. With the makeshift device slung over his shoulder, Vale left the annex, the weight of his discovery serving as a counterbalance to the overwhelming dread that filled him. The path to the core was now more distinct, marked by signs of struggle and desperation, the remnants of a final stand made by those who had tried to stem the tide of infection. This trail of courage and desperation guided Vale, reaffirming his resolve to end the nightmare. As Vale approached the core, the infected seemed to multiply, drawn irresistibly to the energy pulsing through the station's veins. It was here, in a narrow service corridor, that he faced his first real test using the makeshift coolant weapon. When a horde of infected ambushed him, Vale deployed his new weapon in a desperate bid for survival. The device proved effective. The infected recoiled and shrieked as the freezing liquid made contact, their mutated flesh hardening and cracking under the extreme cold. However, the victory was fleeting. The commotion drew more of the infected, and soon the corridor was swarming with the twisted forms of what were once the station's crew. Vale fought on, each blast of coolant granting him a momentary reprieve. Emerging from the melee, battered but resolute, Vale found himself at the entrance to the core chamber. The door was slightly open, its security protocols having been overridden in the earlier chaos. He paused at the threshold, the steady hum of the core resonating like a siren song, beckoning him to his final challenge. Inside, the core throbbed with power, the vital heart of the station exposed and vulnerable. Vale stepped forward, his plan clear in his mind, though the outcome remained uncertain. Turning the station's very lifeblood into a weapon against the infection was a bold gamble, with potentially dire consequences if he failed. But retreat was not an option. Vale set to work, his movements a blend of desperation and hope, using the makeshift coolant weapon as his crucial tool. The fate of the station, and his own, now teetered precariously on the brink of the abyss into which he had so deliberately stepped. And with that, we draw the curtain on Part 3 of the Triverse Commander Atlas Vale series. Stay tuned for Part 4, where our journey into the unknown continues. See you soon. If you've stuck with me up to this point, a heartfelt thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to remind you that my entire channel is dedicated to the Triverse and its enthralling Mechanoid saga. While many of the stories stand alone, allowing you to dive in at any point, crafting these narratives takes about 4 or 5 days each, so your patience is greatly appreciated. If you find yourself enjoying what you see, consider exploring more of my videos. Each one, in its own unique way, weaves together more of the overarching story I'm telling.